Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Milwaukee Journal Sentinel Wisconsin Badgers podcast. Name is pending. Thank you to those who submitted some suggestions after our maiden voyage, our relaunch podcast episode last week. Gave us some pretty good suggestions. Got a couple names that we're still deciding between. I do expect by next week we'll have something a little more concrete on that front. I am JR Radcliffe. I work for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. So do my two colleagues that I am joined by today. That is John Steppe and Mark Stewart. They cover the Wisconsin Badgers. They're in very different places today. Mark Stewart is in Madison. John Steppe, Austin, Texas. How's it going in Austin? I bet you do not have the weather that we have in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Just a hunch.
No, I did not need a jacket as I walked in and out for lunch. So that was quite wonderful.
I like how you casually dropped the In-N-Out burger reference in there. I know that was important to you. The no jacket would be amazing. It is so cold here today as we record this on Thursday. A lot of things going on in the Badger sphere. You are in Austin because the volleyball team is going to play against Stanford in the Sweet 16. That's coming up on Friday afternoon, like early afternoon if you're listening to this already. Volleyball may be over by now, by the time you're hearing this. There's been some football machinations. The basketball team, the men's basketball team, the women's basketball team had a really huge win, which we're going to talk about. Mark Stewart, I didn't even say, I should have said, how are you doing? I have not even thrown it to you. How are things? You're cold probably in Madison like the rest of us.
Well, if I looked out the window, I would be cold, but I'm focused on you guys. So I'm nice and toasty inside. That's where my goal is to not leave the house today. That'll be so if I'm successful in doing that, then today will be a win.
Yes. I also enjoy days when I don't have to leave the house, although that is quite rare. We'll start with the men's basketball team. They went to Nebraska. They also went on a road trip, probably cold in Nebraska too, just like the shooting.
It was.
Just like the shooting, because John, that was a bludgeoning. Nebraska 90, Wisconsin 60, a 30-point beatdown in the Big Ten, the second Big Ten game of the season. John, that's real tough. It's real tough, and it's left me wondering what we even have here with this basketball team. Now, Nebraska is ranked. They're good. They played well. They shot very well. But defensively, not seeing a team like in Wisconsin that I think is certainly not capable of competing with the big boys in the Big Ten. And now I'm wondering, is this even a tournament team? I think so, probably. But that was a pretty humbling experience after coming off the non-conference win over Marquette. Give me some takeaways from this game. I mean, how high is the alert level right now on the Wisconsin Badgers after watching them lose by 30 in Nebraska?
Yeah, I would say kind of the first piece of context I would add is that Nebraska is undefeated, and they're undefeated for a reason. This is a very good Huskers team that they lost to. So, you do and on the road at Nebraska, that is not an easy place to play. That being said, there are certainly some reasons for concern. You look at defensively, the fact that Greg Gard just outright said that they don't have a defensive identity. That's really not what you want to be hearing from your head basketball coach in mid-December. So, that's certainly a reason for concern. The way that they really got, out-physical, even though I'm turning that into a word. The way that they've been out-physical now in all three losses. I think, against BYU, you can say, okay, that's a top 10 team with BYU. Okay, you get it. Okay, TCU, Jamie Dixon has those guys play hard. Okay, now you're seeing for a third time where Wisconsin's physicality has really been challenged. And, I think, back to the play, I think is maybe it was 15 something left in the second half where, Nolan Winter goes up for the layup. Would have been blocked, but it's an offensive foul. The Nebraska guy has a, bloody mouth. Or blood on his face or whatever, and it just felt like Nebraska was the tougher team in Lincoln, and I think that's a reason for concern in terms of going into this season. I think a lot of people, myself included, I thought that the potential was there for a second weekend in the tournament. This is still mid-December, so I'm not saying okay, the sky is falling, this team is going to miss the tournament, all that. But there are certainly some issues, some major issues that you have that they really need to resolve because those goals that people are thinking about at the beginning of the season, you can't do that when you play just as poorly defensively. And I thought it wasn't just one thing either that they were coming up short on defensively. They were coming up short from they're giving Nebraska really good looks outside. Nebraska didn't necessarily always take advantage, so I guess it could have been even worse. From that standpoint, the looks that Nebraska is getting down low. I think back to guard calling a timeout after just terrible ball screen defense. A lot of things that certainly give you a lot of reason for concern. They have some time before Villanova, so I guess that's a really long way of saying there's certainly a very real reason, very real list of reasons for concern at this point. But also, I wouldn't necessarily hit the panic button considering that this is their first true road game. Yeah, BYU is a not so friendly neutral site, but it's a lot different when you're going into Lincoln. So, yeah, I would say certainly a lot to work on. And I think we're going to be talking this is probably not the last time that we're going to be talking about what this defense does or doesn't do in a big game.
Yeah. Mark Stewart, I'd be remiss if I didn't get your thoughts. You were there to see them against Marquette, which was a lopsided victory for Wisconsin. Marquette down way bad. Really, really tough times for the Marquette men's basketball team. That is a whole separate conversation. Maybe we'll get our guy Ben Steele in to talk about Marquette, but that's for another day. I wonder what you think about this team. They are a little Jekyll and Hyde. We've seen them play very well. It is kind of crazy that they didn't get their first true road game until December 10th. I do think that BYU game is a road game. We could call it neutral all we want, but come on. Still, they have not played well in those opportunities. Give me a sense of what you're seeing from this men's basketball team. Mark, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I guess to start off with going back to last night's game, I get why people will be concerned about, 30-point loss, especially in the second half. It's like, you turn your head and it's a 10-point game, and then all of a sudden it's like, how's it over 20? It got out of hand really quickly in the second half, even though Wisconsin was pretty much behind the whole game. I guess what stands out to me a couple of things. One, John talked about, having a team that, initially you think, they can get to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. And to do that, you do have to have some star power. So I think a guy like John Blackwell is developing into that star power kind of guy that, even when defenses are playing great, he's still going to be able to do what he, does and do it successfully and help the team get over the hump. For me, I looked at that 30-point game and I'm not too concerned about it. We're only December 11th right now. So it's still very early. This is the second Big Ten game. There's a lot of season left. I'm interested to see where they are. If this happened in February, then you really got a problem, I think. But I think now, there's so much ahead of this team that, if they start playing well, if they kind of clean some things up defensively in these next, this 9-day break that they have, because Villanova's not doing that great either, I don't think. So I think that'll be an interesting, matchup for them. But I guess I'm not too worried about them yet. I think this is an evolving process with this team. There's so many new guys that to think they're going to come in and just be locked in defensively at this stage of the season would probably be asking a lot, even though I'm sure Greg has some high standards for them. So my thought is I'm not too worried about them. I think they're doing okay. You'd like to see them, you don't want to see them get beat up on the road, but it would have been worse if it happened here at home. At this stage of the year, I would have been worried more if they got beat up like that at home, but this happens on the road, and everyone knows how tough it is to win on the Big Ten in the road.
John Blackwell only shooting 1 of 11. You mentioned that star power. He had a rough game, so that certainly contributed on the offensive end. Just 7 points for him. Kind of interesting, I think, to see Alexis Biliauskas get into the starting lineup. He's not playing more minutes than Austin Rapp, who effectively went to the bench in his place. But Austin Rapp, I imagine, transferred here, looked at as a starter from the word go. So that's been an interesting development as well. Pretty tight rotation of I guess 7 guys when you really count Jake Janicki. At least in this game, that was the case. What do we think of those uniforms? Those all reds, guys. How are we feeling about that? That was an interesting look. Took me a long time to figure out which one was Nebraska when I turned on the TV. What do we think, guys?
I like them.
You do?
I like the story behind them. You know,
Hmm.
the fact that Nolan Winter and John Blackwell got to work with Under Armour to design them, I think is pretty cool. So, that's the aspect of it that I like. Blackwell was telling me about how, it would be cool to do like an all black uniform, but apparently there are various rules and regulations of what they can and can't do. Whether that be with Under Armour or with the NCAA or whoever. So,
Sure.
they're a little different, but like, I'm a fan of, seeing different uniforms, different looks. I think it still has enough of the Badger brand that, it is a little interesting though. Yeah. The fact that you said like, it took a while to figure out which one was Nebraska. It was a little different, but
Yeah.
different
It's
in a
fine.
good way as I see it.
I love different. I do like different. Those struck me a little differently. I don't know. Wasn't vibing with them, but when you lose by 30, I tend to not vibe with any of the uniform choices or any of the choices being made anywhere on the floor. Like it's all bad. Burn it all down. I need to see him against a non-red opponent, I think. What are you thinking, Mark?
And I told Steppe this with the all red football uniforms. I'm not a fan of it. It's just too much red. And I will say this: red is my favorite color.
Oh,
Okay, it is my favorite color, but there are some circumstances where there's just too much of it, and I like there'll be a couple times during the football season where the teams got on those all the red pants and the red tops,
yeah.
and I'm like, I I'm on the record. I don't like that look. Okay. And similarly, I like these uniforms. I like the script. The Badger up there. I like that. But if it were me, I guess I would like a little more something to offset the red. That's just my personal take.
Totally.
I do like the variety. I mean, I do like. Yeah. I mean, I would like to see Wisconsin do a little more with the uniforms. Maybe not go as far as Oregon is gone, but mix it up occasionally with something, a different look that you know maybe gets for whatever, if that gets people excited, that gets some people excited, but that's my thought. Like I say, I mean, I like the effort, but like I say, I just want a little something to maybe offset that red a little bit.
Before we
People are
talk,
probably feeling pretty good about it after they crush Marquette in them, and they bring that back out for Nebraska, and it's like, oh, not so much anymore now.
that is a good point. But before we leave the hard court, because I do think there's probably more conversation there about this men's team, but it is early enough where I kind of agree with you guys. It's hard to really get a full sense, especially with this team. Hard to get a full sense of how they'll do in the Big Ten season. Let's go to the women's side, to you, Mark, because the women's team had a really nice win over a ranked opponent, Michigan State. That was a nice feather in the cap for Robin Pinchton and this rebuilding process that the women's basketball team is going through. They followed up with a win over San Diego. I don't know. I don't have the context to know that whether or not this is a team that could also compete for an appearance in the NCAA tournament. I would imagine we're not there yet, but beating a ranked team is certainly a step in the right direction. So what are your thoughts? What are your takeaways from what you've seen with this women's team?
I mean, I was really impressed. I will preface this that, for all the women's hoops fans out there who are following it, Michigan State was missing one of its starters.
Sure.
She was injured, and I think one of their other players, I don't know if she got poked in the eye or something. She didn't play as much as I thought. But that said, I don't know. I was kind of impressed. I don't think this is, we should punch your NCAA tournament tickets yet. I think we are quite far away from there. And the Big Ten is going to be, it's going to be brutal. It's a rugged conference for women's hoops. But I thought they did a lot of good stuff there, especially their big. Their big players. They have a senior transfer named Gift Uchenna, 6'3" forward who really lit it up at Southern Illinois last year. But that's Southern Illinois, and no disrespect to the Salukis out there. But so I was interested to see how she would fare against those bigger bodies in the Big Ten, and she darn near had a triple double. I mean, I think it was like 14 points, 15 rebounds, 7 blocks. So I mean, her performance there really impressed me because I do think that the transfer guards that they have added, I think those two can play, Destiny Howe and Kira Daniels, and then you got one of the holdovers, Ronnie Porter, who's still a key contributor. Heck, she almost had a triple double. You almost had two players with triple doubles in the same game. So I think they're on the right track. There's a different vibe on this team. I mean, those who follow the Badgers know there's a lot of stuff going on last year, whether what you believe or what you don't believe with, this uh, court case is kind of working its way through the channels now in terms of how some of the players didn't like how they were treated during the Mosley era. But it just seems like, for whatever it's worth, I think change has done this program good. Um, and it's just a different vibe, with this group. And, so I thought it was, really encouraging. And the other thing I'll say in closing is I liked how they came out. They came out and took the first punch, so to speak. Or not took it, you know, hit the first punch, just for lack of a better wording. They were very aggressive. They came out, took it to Michigan State, set the tone for the game. And I think it really kind of paid off, just in how they were able to kind of pull away. It wasn't even really a close game. I mean, it's rare. I mean, you sit there in the final 4 minutes and they're up 13, and you realize that, like, wow, this one's not going to come down to the wire. So, very promising. Like I said, it's a very, very promising team. Like, we're not going to get too excited about Nebraska beating up on the men last night. We shouldn't get too excited about,
Sure.
Wisconsin beating Michigan State in terms of what this means in the big picture of the season. But, it's definitely a big building block and a confidence boost.
Football team also beat a couple teams ranked in the 20s, and it didn't mean a whole lot. But the football team's going through some changes now. We're in the off season, and a couple guys have said that they're hitting the transfer portal. Of course, it is certainly that time of year, and will be over the next several weeks. Two of the names that stand out, I'm sure, for Badgers fans are linebacker Tackett Curtis and wide receiver Tretch Kekahuna. Okay, this is the second year now where Kekahuna, at least there was reporting that he's going into the portal. And last year, the Badgers, whatever they did, they came to the table with more NIL money. I don't actually know what happened there, but they convinced him to stay, and he came back. He is a pretty exciting talent and somebody that I think a lot of Badgers fans would be sorry to see go, for sure, because there's a lot of untapped potential there. At the same time, for me personally, I look at it and I think, well, first of all, I can't blame him at all. There's nobody to throw him the football. There was nobody to throw him the football. So I don't blame him. But also, I realize that the next quarterback of the Wisconsin Badgers is probably not somebody that we know yet. And there will be some portal hunting, and there will hopefully be some introduction of a passing game that surpasses what we saw in 2025. But like, should the Badger fans be worried if any receiver leaves? Because those guys weren't getting used. Talented, sure, but like, what is the point of caring too deeply about the guys who are talented out there? Because first you have to have somebody who can get them the football and make the most out of them. Now, I'm sure their plans are to do just that, but I guess I find myself thinking, Tretch Kekahuna, go find someplace else, man. I think that's good for you. I think it's good for you because you'll find somebody who can make use of your skill set. And Tackett Curtis happens to play a position that I think the Badgers do have a lot of talent at. So I want to know, John, I'll start with you, just your thoughts on those guys leaving, and any other moves that reports or whatever that we've heard so far from the Badgers, and what you think that signals, if anything, about the direction of how this offseason is going to go.
Yeah, starting with Tackett Curtis, that is a position of strength right now for the Badgers, Cooper Catalano and Mason Posa. So, it's clear that those two guys are the future of Wisconsin's linebacker position. And you're going to see the writing on the wall if you're Tackett. And I don't think that's necessarily a surprise. The portal giveth and the portal taketh away. Yes, it would be great to have that depth, but that's a hard sell for somebody. With wide receiver, seeing some attrition there doesn't surprise me. It kind of follows, it feels like a similar script to when I was covering Iowa, and Iowa had some very inept passing years. And after those seasons, it was really hard for them to retain wide receivers. And that's a problem that I think they still haven't necessarily caught up from. So I don't think it's necessarily a surprise. It's certainly, you need to have talent at that position. So that's certainly not me downplaying it. But, as you said, you need somebody throwing them the ball. And if you're a wide receiver and you're not getting the role that you're looking for, it's not really a surprise that you're going to see somebody like Tretch, go, portal searching to see if he can find a better opportunity, because the same things that we have seen in terms of why he's such an exciting talent, the tape is there for a lot of other college coaches to see.
Mark, I'd love your thoughts on those guys. And another change is the offensive line coach, AJ Blazek, who was here the last couple of years. He's out, and it seems like they kind of have a beat on a guy who's going to replace him. But offensive line has been unquestionably one of the biggest disappointments for the Badgers over the last few years. Usually a strength of this program, whether it's because they just struggle recruiting the state or just recruiting the right guys. They changed philosophies a couple times. Offensive line play has been really down. I don't know if that's one coach's fault or philosophical fault or whatever, but I'd be curious your thoughts about that as well, in addition to these guys hitting the portal.
Yeah, on the guys hitting the portal real quick. Yeah, as far as Tackett Curtis goes, it's well, yeah, as John said, it's not a surprise. And the porter, he said the porter giveth and taketh. It's kind of funny with Tackett because when he came here 2 years ago, he probably was the most anticipated transfer in that group after the 2023 season. Yeah, that was after the 2023 season. But this year, I mean, if you're, you look at it. I mean, I think I counted he played 6 or 7 snaps of defense in the final 6 games. So, that, like I say, that was not a surprise. He's a senior. He's got to go somewhere to, hopefully shine and show his talent so that if he wants to make the NFL, he gives himself a good shot at that. As far as Tretch goes, I was a little surprised. I wasn't sure what was going to happen there, and who knows? He might come. They might convince him to stick around. Um, for the struggles the offense had, I did think that they tried to give him as many touches as they could. With him running either jet sweeps or toss sweeps coming out. From his receiver position. I think at some point I counted. After Vinny. Um, God, I'm drawing a blank here. But
Vinny
after,
Anthony.
Vinny Anthony. Okay, I was going to say something else, but sorry, Vinny, if you care.
Vinny Anthony, who
good
had a
guy.
great year, as any receiver did in Wisconsin. He at least he
Yeah,
was able to get some opportunities.
yeah. But I think after Vinny, he was probably the receiver that got the second most touches,
For
and
sure he
that was
was,
just a
yeah.
combination of runs and passes. So he will be missed, but it's like, what are we missing? We really didn't get a chance to see what he could do. So it's like, these last 2 years, I've been sort of, a taste here or there with Tretch, but it's just the offensive struggles have, really kind of hampered him. So like I say, I don't blame him. And shifting to the offensive line coach, AJ Blazek, um, it's kind of, the first thing I thought of when, I heard that he was not coming back is during one of Luke Fickell's press conferences earlier this year, he was asked about how he evaluates his assistant coaches. And one of the things, Luke said at the time was that he sort of looks at, okay, what this group has in terms of, it's not necessarily how they perform specifically, but, are they performing better than this group, they should perform? Are they performing below it? Things like that. And my first thought when he said that was that doesn't sound good for AJ Blasi. I just didn't, because the group overall has not, I would say it's still probably their most talented group. You probably see Riley Mahlman in the NFL. Maybe you see Joe Brunner in the NFL at some point. You got a lot of young guys who down the road are, might do some special things. But, the offensive line's just been kind of it has been a disappointment. I can't think how many times the last 2-3 years Wisconsin's had quarterback problems, and then Luke Fickell says, "Hey, we're going to have to lean on the offensive line," and the offensive line has not been able to, deliver. couple other things about AJ Blazek that maybe worked against him were one, Davis Heinzen, the transfer from Central Michigan, came in, started the first game at left tackle, and clearly wasn't ready. That's AJ's job to know, okay, he's in the starting lineup, he's ready to go. And for him not to make it through that first game, I don't think that showed well in terms of not necessarily just the development of the guy, because it is tough. He came in after spring practice, but it's like, well, maybe he shouldn't have been out there, to begin with. And then the other thing was the whole issue at center. I know they had a lot of injuries there, but for a while there were a lot of guys, they were having problems getting snaps off in practice and things like that. It was like, so some of the developmental aspects maybe weighed in against him. And let's face it, the other part of it, the coach Mateos from Arkansas, who was supposed to be coming in and being the new offensive line coach, all of a sudden he's available, and Arkansas, they made a coaching change down there. He wasn't retained on that staff, and then all of a sudden, Jeff Grimes, the offensive coordinator, has a guy available who he's worked with in the past as an offensive line coach, has some success with, and now he's available. So, that may have been the biggest thing right there. You combine a lot of those issues, and Grimes maybe just thinking or thinking, well, hey, maybe we need to change. And then also, hey, my guy's out there that I know I can work with, and he knows what I want out of the line in this offense. So, again, to be wordy, like, I don't want to be, have too long of an answer here, like I've already had. But that's kind of, those are my initial thoughts on those two things.
I don't think there's any one player. I also, in college football, with the rosters as big as they are, I never feel like one player outside of maybe the quarterback can make that big of a difference. But I wonder how the season goes, if at all differently, if Kevin Haywood doesn't get hurt before the season. That was the guy who was going to be left tackle. That's the reason Davis Heinzen came in. They wouldn't have needed him if Kevin Haywood had been healthy. He went out with plenty of time for them to figure out the problem, but they just did not have somebody at that talent level who could play that position. And, injuries have hurt them. Jake Renfro, that was another big injury that they really struggled with. But like the offensive line, it's like 4 years now, 4 years where the offensive line has not played at the level that Wisconsin football needs. So yeah, another new direction there. We'll, I'm sure, have more to follow with the football team as as players come filtering in, more players leave. The portal not yet open officially, but that will be coming here early in January. Let's take a look at the volleyball team, John. That's what you're in Austin for. Austin, Texas. No jacket. We've got some daytime volleyball on Friday against Stanford. That's a team that's ranked ahead of the Badgers. The Badgers will be pretty significant underdogs to get through this regional. If they do beat Stanford, and that will be an upset, they'll have to beat Texas, which is one of the 4 best teams in the country. Very difficult challenge awaits. They've, you said this on the last podcast, they were at full strength and they still lost to Texas earlier this year. So I don't imagine they're going to come out of there. I don't want to be a pessimist, but like, that's good. It'll be a great story. And we'll definitely be talking a lot about it. We'll be previewing a Final Four on the next episode if that's what happens. But more than likely, this is where the road ends. And I wonder how you evaluate this season of Wisconsin volleyball. They came through a major injury. When they lose, it will only be their 5th loss of the season. Impressive stuff. And this team, I think, some newcomers. They had some, like I said, they had the injuries, but they were able to still be one of the 10 best teams in the country. What do you think? What are you going to think about with the 2025 Wisconsin Badgers volleyball team, and what is the outlook in your mind going forward?
Yeah, a lot of it really does go down to what happens this weekend. You think about it, and this is Kelly Sheffield's 13th season as head coach at Wisconsin, and all 13 seasons resulted in at least getting this far. And the teams that you look back in terms of the previous 12, the teams that were especially special were the ones that won in this weekend, and obviously in the case of 2021, the following weekend. So, a lot of how this team is remembered does kind of go down to what happens here. And I think Stanford, I like this timing of this match where, Stanford is ranked higher than Wisconsin, has probably a stronger overall resume than Wisconsin. But with the way that Wisconsin has been playing lately versus the way that Stanford has been playing lately, I think this is the right time for Wisconsin to have this matchup. Texas, as you said, there's a reason why they're a 1 seed. And that would be, I think, a serious upset. Not impossible with the way that Wisconsin's been playing, but that would really be a remarkable story if that were to happen. But kind of in general, in terms of regardless of what happens this weekend, I think this is a team that took a lot of different pieces and put together a really special group. The season that Mimi Collier has had, transferring from Oregon and, putting together a very strong candidacy for postseason awards, particularly for National Player of the Year. She has won 14 semifinalists. And, the numbers that she has put together have been incredibly impressive. The way that, they kind of took some challenges in that middle month of the season when Charlie Furbringer was hurt. And, they got through that and played their best volleyball in the month of November. Again, month of December is what a lot of people are going to remember. And I think the thing that a lot of people internally within the program are going to think about with this 2025 team is how much joy they play with. And you see it in different occasions. I think back to, when I was watching the selection show with them, just how much joy they seem to be having just watching the selection show. Something, it wasn't like it was a question whether Wisconsin was going to host even, let alone, it's obvious that they're going to be in the tournament. It's obvious that they're going to be one of the 16 hosts, but just the joy that this team plays with day to day is, I think, one of the things that internally within the program, this 2025 team will be remembered by. And really an impressive senior class. And you think about, I mentioned Collier, speaking of transfers, Alicia Andrew, who goes by Allie, the impact that she's made as a Baylor transfer, and fun matchup this week for her in terms of going up against her younger sister, Lizzie. Wrote about that. So make sure to check that out at jsonline.com. But, this is a really impressive senior class. And of course, Carter Booth, being kind of the longer time person in this senior class, it's an impressive senior class of, Carter Booth was here for 3 years. Mimi Collier was here for 1 year. They'll both be teammates at the next level in Major League Volleyball. But, there have been already a lot of special things that this team has done. And, we'll see what happens this week in Austin. It's kind of the regional of death when you look at just how difficult this region is, maybe compared to some of the others, where I think going in, you would have said Texas is a national championship contender. You would put Stanford, I think everyone at the beginning of the year had Nebraska and Texas in their own tier. But, Stanford, people would have said would be in that same tier, or I should say that next tier after Texas and Nebraska. And you'd put Wisconsin in that next tier too. And, Indiana is kind of the one surprise out of that, but Indiana's done a lot of good things. And, that's probably, as, Kelly Sheffield has said, I'm paraphrasing here, but, probably the best season that that program's had. So you look at it and it's a really challenging path here looking ahead. And, but you already have a lot in terms of the special season that Mimi Collier has had, the joy that this team has played with, and the way that they've bounced back from the Charlie Furbringer injury in the middle of the season. That's not an easy thing to do.
And speaking of transfer portal, like we just were, this team is one of the halves in college volleyball. They're going to get some of the best players in the country interested in playing for Wisconsin volleyball, as was the case this last year when Mimi Collier, Grace Egan, and Grace Lopez, who is going to be back, I assume, next year from injury, after, she's an All-American candidate from Miami, she'll be somebody who could contribute next year if she's healthy. And they're going to get some outstanding players. Sarah Franklin before them, she was National Player of the Year, right? She was certainly Big Ten Player of the Year. Yeah. They get that caliber of player is coming to Wisconsin. So it's easy to be optimistic about anything going ahead. Furbringer will be a junior next year. So I would imagine she'll stay. I guess we can't assume that with any college athlete, but they should be, of course, very, very good next year, even though they'll be losing a couple of those top flight kids. So again, if you're hearing this on Friday morning, turn on your TV set because there's a good chance there's volleyball on. This gets going before noon. So check that out on ESPN, and maybe there's a little bit of a Cinderella run in the Wisconsin Badgers here. Mark, before we get going, anything else that you want to touch on? And that could be the hockey programs are up and running, of course, and having very successful seasons. But anything else that's in the Wisconsin Badger sphere that you want to touch on?
This is a unique time of year where I think this is the first weekend in a while. There's no, John's taking care of hoops and volleyball, but this weekend there's no men's basketball, there's no women's basketball, there's no men's hockey, there's no women's hockey. So this is kind of like I don't know, I don't want to get excited about a dead period of Badger athletics, but
it's a bye week.
It's like a big bye week. But yeah, the one thing I will say, last weekend, the men's hockey team went down to Notre Dame, scored a comeback win on Friday, beat up on Notre Dame in the second game. And I was wondering if they were going to be number one this week, because the Badger men's hockey team's number 2. And I was thinking, is this the week that we get the men's and the women's hockey teams ranked number 1? Didn't happen. Wisconsin, the men are still ranked number 2, but they've closed the gap on Michigan. So, the men's hockey team, they're doing pretty good. They're going to be down in Milwaukee in a couple of weeks at the Quick Trip holiday tournament at the Pfizer Forum. So that'll be a chance for people in Milwaukee to check them out. But otherwise, no, I'm looking forward to I don't dare say quiet weekend, because you never know in this business. I get my fingers.
That's cheap.
But I don't believe it. Yeah, I'll knock on wood for you. I don't believe in those jinxes and stuff. We don't have any control over that stuff. But that would be the main thing. That was the last thing. The hockey program's doing pretty good. And actually, I was thinking they might have a chance to be number 1 this week. And I guess the pollsters said no thanks. We'll wait. Let's see what else you can do.
Mike Hastings seems like a home run hire at this point. Second season with the program. They, of course, the men's team had kind of fallen on some hard times, and they are back, certainly with a vengeance. And I know like you said, the face off here at Pfizer Forum in Milwaukee, that's become a recurring thing between the holidays. I think it's going December 28th. There'll be some games, 4 teams competing, including Wisconsin. So that'll be fun if you're looking for some post-Christmas thing to do. That is certainly on the table for you. And a very family-friendly event. My daughter loves hockey, and she's not even like a big sports fan, but she just loves going to Admirals games. She loves hockey, how fast it moves. She's an 11-year-old kid, and she loves it. Cannot wait to go to another hockey game. So, the Radcliffes might be in attendance there in downtown Milwaukee. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. WEAC football this weekend, Mark. If you need something to do, the NCAA Division III football tournament is still going. UW River Falls, for the first time in school history, have reached the quarterfinals. The highest, I don't think they're the highest scoring team in the nation necessarily anymore, but they average like 550 yards a game. It's insane what they're doing. An incredible season for them. First time they've won the WEAC since 1984, I think. So they are still alive in the tournament. Always fun, always some good Wisconsin representation in the Division III tournament. Julius Davis, former Wisconsin running back, he and Montana State are still around in the NCAA or the Division I FCS tournament that's going on. Wrote about him at jsonline.com. There was a little dust up with his coach after the game that got a lot of national attention. It seems like things are smoothed over, but Julius Davis, in his 7th year of NCAA football, is still running the football, leading Montana State's rushing attack. He had the COVID year, redshirt year, medical redshirt year. He is still around Menominee Falls, guys. So that's something to keep an eye on. If you're looking for some sports this weekend, there's going to be some FCS football on as well. But gentlemen, John Steppe, Mark Stewart, find everything they have at jsonline.com and in the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. We're going to keep going with this thing as often as we can into the holidays. We'll probably have to take a break, but then coming out talking men's basketball, women's basketball, the football team, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you for listening to the Wisconsin Badgers Milwaukee Journal Sentinel podcast. We will chat with you again next week. Bye-bye.